everyone, welcome to our first live stream of the year.
Oh, wow.
Been a long year already, hasn't it?
So long.
So yeah, for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, we do these little demos and Q&A sessions on the last Thursday of every month. We didn't actually do one last month because Christmas and New Year, and it just didn't seem right.
Oh, we did one last month, just early.
Did we?
Yeah, December 14th, I think.
Well, it's been a long time since we did one, about a month and a half. So here we are, we're back again. We are live, ready for all your questions. So yeah, if you do have any podcast-related questions that you haven't asked us yet via the email form, then just drop them into one of the chat messages on either Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching us, just down below or to the side or wherever it is on your screen. And we will get to your questions a little bit later on in the stream. So yeah, we tend to just kick things off with the demo of Podcast.co, which is done by Laura here, who is our customer success manager at Podcast.co. I'm Daryl, I am the marketing manager here. So yeah, we kick things off with the demo, which is run by Laura, as I've just said. So, ready to just take it away?
Yeah, of course.
Cool, all right, I'll pop up your screen here.
Wonderful. So yeah, like Daryl said, if you guys have any questions as I'm going through any of this at all, do feel free to leave them in the comments, wherever those may lie on your screen, and we'll get to them at the end. So what I have here is a little example account that I've got set up, and I'm just going to kind of take you through how a normal account would look and function, and we'll dive right in. So off the bat here, you've got a little home page, and this basically shows you everything to do your podcast at a very quick glance. So this is sort of designed for those times where maybe you're on your way to a meeting and you need to just log in really quick to check your stats and then log back out again. So you can see really quickly how many episodes of your podcast are live currently, your monthly downloads and your monthly unique downloads. So the difference between those two figures is just monthly downloads is every single download your podcast has had over the last 30 days. And unique downloads is every person that's downloaded your podcast over the last 30 days. So the example I usually give is if I were to download an episode of your podcast 4 times in a row, big fan, total downloads would show 4. But unique downloads would show 1 because I'm one person downloading 1 episode. So that's kind of how those work. And those are both on a rolling 30-day period as well. So if you see the figures go up and down there, that's why. And to the right here, you also have a little estimated subscribers graph as well. And that's just to give you a rough idea at roughly how many subscribers your podcast likely is at the moment. When you first get started, you'll have a little checklist down the bottom here. My one's gone away because I've done all the 3 things on there. But when you first get started, those are just to sort of give you a bit of guidance on what you should be looking at doing next with your podcast. Each of them has a little video explaining what the point means, done by myself. So once you've got all 3 of those ticked off, they'll go away and you'll be left with these 3 boxes here. So that's a link to our free crash course on podcasting. You don't have to be signed up to Podcast.co to access that. You can access that from the website really easily if you want to. Our link to our production services and our studios that you can rent out. And a link to our help center. And in there, you'll find a bunch of help guides for pretty much everything. So if you've got a question, you can probably find the answer in there. But if you can't, there is usually a little chat icon in the bottom right of your account. That links through to our support desk, which is mainly run by me. Sometimes it's other people. But that will get straight through to either myself or another member of the team, and we'll be able to get back to you usually within 24 hours at maximum. That's not including weekends and public holidays in the UK, though. Episodes tab right here. So this is probably where you'd be spending the majority of your time. And this is where you'd be uploading your episodes and sorting those out. So in terms of uploading episodes, super easy. you can either click and drag an episode into this window and it will start uploading, or you can click this orange upload episode button, who'd have guessed it, at the top here, and then that'll open up your file finder and you can grab the file that way instead. We do recommend MP3 just because that does work universally pretty much on everything. You can upload, I think it's M4A, but our system will end up turning that into an MP3 on the way in. So you're best just uploading MP3. And then once your episode is uploaded, this window will pop up. And this is basically a chance for you to type in the title of your episode, a bit of a description about what's going on in the episode. Author name you don't necessarily need to fill in unless it's a guest host for that particular episode, and you need to change the main author temporarily for that one episode. If it's the same author all the time, you don't need to fill that in, and I'll show you where you can fill that in a little bit. Episode type is just choosing what type of episode it is. So full is a normal episode. Trailer, we do recommend that you upload a trailer for your podcast. I'll explain that in a bit more detail later on, but it is recommended that you create a trailer for your podcast, about 30 seconds to a minute, just kind of explaining very briefly what's going on with the podcast and why people should subscribe and make sure they get every single episode. Episode number, season number if you're doing seasons. If you're not, you can leave that blank. And then content rating filter down the bottom here as well. So if you've got an episode that's got a few naughty words in it and you wouldn't like your kids to hear them, just turn that on. If it's going to be pretty much every single episode that's got some naughty words in it or subject matter that shouldn't be discussed in front of the children, you can turn a content rating filter on later on that just covers the entire podcast, so you don't have to switch this on every single episode you upload. And then if you're on our Pro plan or above, you'll also have the option to add pre and post roll to the episode as well, using this little switch here. And I'll explain that in a bit more detail later on as we get to how you set that up. Once you've filled in all the bits about the episode, you will get, if I can find it, you'll get through to this last little window, which is just you deciding when you want this episode to go live. So public is live straight away. Scheduled is if you want to schedule the episode up to automatically publish at a later date or time. So you've got tomorrow and 7 days from today as presets, but you can select a custom date and time here. Schedule that up and that will go out automatically at that date and time, and you don't have to worry about it. And unlisted is kind of like a drafts box, so anything in there is not publicly available. The only way you can access the bits in that section is if you have the direct link to the content that's in that section. So people usually get pretty creative with that, but it's entirely up to you how you want to use that section. Also, on the end of these episodes here, you've got a couple of extra little buttons. So share episode gives you a few ways of sharing the episode out with your listeners. So you have the embeddable players per episode in here. So if you have maybe a blog style website and you have an article you want to embed one of your podcast episodes in, which we do sometimes on the Podcast.co blog, you can come in here and grab one of these little mini players with just that specific episode on it. There is an embeddable player for the whole podcast, but again, that'll come later on. Page, again, there's a lot of explaining later on, I'm noticing. But essentially just know that this is a link to this episode on the webpage we provide you with. So you've got that to quick grab from there. File, this was recently put back in. We have a lot of people that use WordPress style websites with embedded players that need the direct MP3 URL to work. So if you're one of those people, this is where you can grab that from really, really easily after the episode's been uploaded. And the audiogram feature also lives in here. So this is a collaboration we have with Headliner. And it is such a cool little program, and it basically allows you to make these graphic style videos of your podcast audio content. So you can clip out some really interesting parts, turn those into videos, and put those up on your socials as promotional material. If you upload the episode and schedule it or move it into unlisted at first, you can also do that before the episode goes live. So you can really use this to create some promotional bits to create some hype before the episode goes out, which is quite cool. Episode analytics here. So this is the analytics for this one individual episode. Now, mine are going to be absolutely dire because this podcast is not public. So I'm sure yours will look a lot better than mine. But in here, you can see I can change the date range at the top here. There's a couple of presets, or I can select a custom start and end date on the calendar, and that all adjusts in the background. On this top graph, it shows you your total and unique downloads per day. You can hover over these to get an actual number for those. And the two graphs down the bottom show you the locations of your listeners and what platform they are using to listen to your podcast as well. And then just on the end here, you have the three dots, which is a couple of miscellaneous bits. So edit just brings up this window again in case you accidentally made a mistake when you were typing descriptions out, or if you need to correct something, you can bring this back up and correct it really easily. You can also backdate episodes. If you've uploaded it and you need to backdate it, you can do that this way as well. Replace media is exactly what it sounds like. If you accidentally upload the wrong audio file, which I've definitely done, you can come in here, click select file, and upload the correct audio without having to take the whole thing down and re-upload it again. Move to unlisted is exactly what it sounds like. If you need to move the episode away into the unlisted section for now, you can do that really quickly. And the transcription feature also lives in here as well. So if you want to provide a transcript of your podcast episode, you can come in here, select the language of the main speaker, and click continue. And then from there, it will generate a full transcript of that one episode. If you're not sure whether this would cover the language that your podcast is in, we do have a full list of the languages the transcription feature covers on the Help Center. So that's just help.podcast.co. There's a full list of languages on there. So if you're not sure, either reach out to myself via the website or go onto the Help Center and just have a quick look at that list in there. So that's pretty much this section. Analytics I'll kind of whiz through because they are pretty much the same as the episode ones I showed you before, but this time they're for the entire podcast as a whole. So again, you can see the date selector up the top here. Same way of customizing that. You can click a custom start and end date on the calendar if you want to. Same graph up the top showing total and unique downloads per day. And the same two down the bottom showing where your listeners are coming from and what platforms they're using to listen. But you also get an extra one over here on the left that will show you your top 10 most popular episodes during the period of time that you're looking at. Mine's only showing 3 currently because this podcast only has 3 episodes. But once you get a few episodes going in your podcast, that will show you your top 10 for that period. Settings in here. This is pretty straightforward. So this is just if you need to adjust anything to do with your podcast as a whole, you can do all of that in here. So if you needed to update the artwork maybe, or make a change to the description of the podcast, you can do that all in here. Advanced is a really important section, and I can't stress this enough. So if something's going wrong with your podcast, I would recommend coming in here and just double checking that things are okay in here first, because there's a couple of troublemakers in this section. So once you've set up your podcast with us, we actually recommend you come to this section straight away and set this up next, just to try and minimize those issues that can pop up. So time zone here is a massive culprit. If this doesn't match up with your time zone, scheduling will be completely out. I remember I had this set up to an American time zone by accident once, tried to upload an episode, it went out at like 2 a.m. in the morning instead of 8 a.m. or something like that. So it's worth just double checking that that matches your time zone. And then the author name here. So if there's no author name in this field, the system will pull in the account owner's name as the author of the podcast by default. So if you need that to be something different, like somebody else's name or a company name, just make sure that you come here and set that up. Otherwise, it will just default to the account owner's name instead. And then just making sure these little content settings here match up with the content you're putting out. If they don't, Apple Podcasts can throw a bit of a hissy fit, so it's worth just double checking. That's also where the explicit filter for the whole podcast I mentioned earlier lies. If you're on the business plan, you also have the ability to turn our branding off on the embeddable players and the Podcast.co page that I'll show you in a bit. So if you are someone, an organization perhaps that needs the cleaner white label look, you can just turn that off on there if you're on the business plan. And down the bottom here, this box, just to quickly summarize it, is basically if you wanted to use a third-party analytics service like Chartable or Podtrack, they usually give you a little link type thing to connect that up. So all you do is just copy and paste it into this box and then hit save. And that will apply it to your RSS feed, and then they can grab the data they need really easily from that. Advertising is only available on our Pro plan and above. And basically, this allows you to apply pre and post roll to the beginning and or end of your podcast episodes. So say, for example, you have a sponsor for a month for your podcast. What you can do is you can record the sponsorship message separately, upload it into here, and then when you upload your next episode, you will have that little apply pre and post roll slider that I showed you before. So you just turn that on and that will automatically stitch whatever is in this section to the beginning and or end of your episode. So it just saves you some editing work there, having to stitch it on or off. One thing to mention about this section is it is a hard edit. So if you later on change the messaging that's in this section, old episodes will still have the old messaging that was in this section, but any new episodes you upload will have the updated messaging on it. Share and publish. Oops, I haven't reset this section, but that's fine. I can explain this. So with distribution, and this is usually where a lot of questions come up. So again, if you guys have any questions, just leave them in the comments and we will get to them at the end, I promise. So with distribution, if you're a brand new podcast, what you can do is you can come into this section and you'll have two different options. So we do allow you to take control of the whole process yourself. You just click, I'd prefer to manage this myself. This little box will go away and you will have your RSS feed link here and a bunch of type boxes underneath that to pop the links into your podcast on the different platforms once you get them back. And a link to our help guides on how to submit to all those different platforms yourself. If you'd rather we take over that process, which most people do, why do extra work, right? Then you can click distribute my podcast and that will send a request over to our submissions team. And this orange text here will change to submissions pending, so you can see there. All these little icons will start grayed out like these ones here. And as we get you approved on the different platforms, they'll light up in color like the Spotify one. And you'll be able to copy the link so you can share it out or open your podcast on that platform and have a quick look at it, make sure it's all okay. So that's a really good visual way of monitoring how far along the progress is. For brand new podcasts, this process can take up to a week. Main culprits of that being Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. They do take the longest most of the time, though Apple have been a little bit quicker recently, so that's nice to see. We do also cover iHeartRadio. That's not on this list, but that one is only by request because they have a few terms that are a little bit picky, and they do take up to 2 weeks. So we just like to be able to keep a bit of a closer eye on that one for people. But if there's something that you do want, just get in contact with us and let us know, and we'll be able to sort that out for you. Podcast player in here. So this is the embeddable player, but for the whole podcast in one player. So you have the embed code up the top here. And this is also where the customization options lie for the players in general. So any changes you make to this player will also be on the episode players as well. So you can choose between a light theme and a dark theme, and you can change the accent color to anything you like. So if you've got a branded color, you can just type that in the bottom here, and that will adjust to your brand color. You can also turn sharing and subscriptions off if you don't want people to be able to do that using the player. Most people leave those on. There's not too many reasons you want to switch those off. And also you have the option between a squared off or rounded off look for the mini players as well. And the embeddable subscribe button. So again, this is for people that have their own websites externally. So you can embed this into your website, and you can choose between a dark and a light theme there again, and change the color of the word subscribe to anything you like. And then you can select up to 5 directories your podcast is live in. And when people come to this button on your website and they want to subscribe, on hover, it will show those options that you've selected, so they can click through and subscribe really easily to the best option for them. And finally is the podcast page. So I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as I can, because I've already gone on for quite a long time. But there's a lot to cover in here, so bear with me. And I will show you an example of a setup page at the end as well. So if you're on the business plan, you can completely turn this page off. So if you have your own external website, for example, and you don't want this web page kind of in the Google search results alongside your website, you can just turn it off completely if you're on the business plan. Then the link will default to pod.co/your podcast name. If you're on the pro plan or above, you can apply a custom domain down here to override that. We have a whole help guide on how to set that up. So that is on the pro plan and above. You can replace the link out. If you want people to be able to contact you via the webpage about your podcast, including potential sponsors, you can turn this on and apply a email address here that you're okay with people contacting you by, and then people will be able to really easily get in contact with you about your podcast. If you're on the pro plan and above, you can apply a Google Analytics tracking ID. So if you want to keep tabs on the traffic on your page, see who's visiting and when and all that jazz, you can sign up for Google Analytics and pop your tracking ID in there. And then you'll be able to see all of that data in your Google Analytics dashboard. Connect up some social media channels down the bottom here, so people can click through and access your social media and subscribe to you there as well. Really, really easy. And if you want to accept donations for your podcast, you can connect up a Patreon or a PayPal link or both, and accept donations on the webpage as well. Design on the left here is basically everything to do with the aesthetic of the page. So you can play around with the different colors for the page in here too. Play around with the fonts as well in here. You also have the header options in here as well. So this is for the banner that sits at the top of the page. So it will default to our color and wave design, as you can see here. You can turn the wave off as well if you want a solid color. But most people do like having a custom background image in the back here. So the size guidelines for this are on the Help Center. Off the top of my head, it's 1920 by 800. And then you have a couple of options for fiddling around with the image, including turning this information off if you just want a nice, clean banner image at the top without the podcast artwork and title over the top of it. The About section will default to the description of your podcast. But if you would like to change it, I believe this is only on the Pro plan and above, then you can come in here and change it to anything you want, including adding pictures and video if you would like to. And if you're on the Pro plan and above as well, you can also add in a little host profile at the bottom of the page. So this is just to add a little bit more about who's actually behind the microphone, just to kind of help to introduce you to your audience and make your audience feel like they know you personally. And you can connect up your own social media channels here as well if you want people to be able to follow you as a host as well. So that is a very quick rundown. Let me just grab an example of a page, because I've just remembered I said I would show an example of the pages before Daryl steals the microphone from me. So this is one that we set up for one of our internal podcasts when it decides to load in. My internet is absolutely atrocious today. I apologize. So we've got this lovely banner image in the background here, the artwork on top and the title. You've got a bunch of quick links up the top here for all our social media. The subscribe button pops out and gives a lot of different options for subscribing to all these different lovely places. And we pop the RSS feed down here just in case we missed any that they want to add to. Share pops out and gives them different options for sharing the podcast on socials with their friends. Again, we put the link down the bottom here in case we missed any that they want to share to. A list of your episodes sits below that. Each of these does have their own little episode specific page as well with the individual episode description. And then just below the list of episodes, you have the little about section, and then you have the bit about the hosts of the podcast, and that's our lovely James Deeney right there. If you have a website connected up in your settings as well, you can link that up to down here where it says visit website, and that will link out to an external website if you want to set something like that up. And that was a very whiz-stop tour of the Podcast.co platform.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, Laura.
That's okay.
Hopefully people found that quite useful, very detailed. There is a lot of features on Podcast.co, so there's a lot to go over. But yeah, if you do have any questions regarding anything that we've just shown you on the platform, then just drop them in the chat below and we will get to those in just a moment. So we do have some that have been sent in previously. I feel like I'm on Blue Peter now. Here's something we did earlier. That is a reference that only the British people will get, I'm afraid. So sorry, American fans. So should we just dive into some of these questions and then take it from there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So first question here is, what advice can you give about doing video podcasting? Audio is great, but sometimes I feel to reach a bigger audience, making or doing video podcasts will help a lot. Thoughts?
I feel like maybe you should answer this one because I think I have a controversial opinion about video podcasting.
So the thing with video podcasting is I'd say it more than doubles your workload because you can't release a video podcast through a distributor like Podcast.co or anything like that. You have to do it yourself manually on YouTube or wherever people put videos, Facebook, I guess.
Yeah.
I say that as we're on Facebook right now. So yeah, you have to do that yourself. It takes more time to edit a video as well. Again, it's double the time, but then you're potentially increasing the audience even further as well. It's just more difficult for people that are just subscribing through audio and only want to listen to you. Yeah. Again, it's just more work, but more reward. So it just depends on your time, I guess.
It's also more work in terms of like not just from an editing standpoint because you have both audio and video to edit, but also in terms of keeping track of your stats because podcast hosting platforms that only distribute your audio won't be able to read your YouTube download numbers and things like that as well. So it does mean that it could dilute your listeners in terms of there'll be less people listening to the audio version because half of them have gone to watch the video version of the podcast instead, and then you have to grab your stats from your hosting platform and also grab your stats from YouTube and add them together yourself. So it saves you work in that respect as well if you have it in one format or the other.
Yeah. And then again, if you are hosting the video on multiple places as well, you need to add those together because you can't amalgamate those.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, it does all add up eventually. But again, if you've got the time for it, the resources, then there's no reason not to. Okay. So next question is, how can I track and better understand what some of the information means, and how can I use it to find specific people who listen to my podcast? So this is a podcast stats related question. And
It is. Yes. So, sorry, I'm just rereading the question to make sure I've understood it properly. So, essentially, the stats in Podcast.co are pretty self-explanatory. So you have the locations at the bottom, and devices, not devices, platforms that people are using to listen as well in there. The total and unique downloads, I think I explained in the demo, but I'll just explain them again really quickly. So total downloads is every single download that your podcast has had. And then unique downloads is every person that's downloaded your podcast instead. So unique tends to be a bit more accurate, but we provide total as well. In terms of using the stats to find specific people who listen to your podcast, best way of doing that is probably the Google Analytics tracking that I showed you to do with the page. So if you set up Google Analytics tracking on your podcast.co page, which is on the Pro plan or above, you are then able to track the traffic on your pod.co page. So if you're sharing that out on like Facebook and Twitter and everything saying, go listen to my podcast here, you'll be able to see exactly who is logging onto that page and having a nosy around. Daryl can probably explain that a bit more eloquently than I can, but I gave it a good go.
No, I mean, that's pretty much how it works. You just,
yeah,
with the analytics tag, you can just track where people are coming from, where they're going on. It only works on your podcast page, so if they're not going through your pod.co page and they're listening in other places, then you're not going to get that detailed information. Which is why we suggest if you are sharing your podcast on social media or anywhere else, then you do it via the pod.co page, just so you can get that unique tracking information. Because if you send a direct link to iTunes or Spotify, then you're not going to get detailed information. It's easier for the consumer, but it's less ideal for you. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Another thing to mention on that, actually, just quickly, is if you're after like demographic information, Spotify has a analytics bit that you can get access to pretty easily as well, and that shows you age ranges and gender identities of your listeners as well, which is quite nice to have. So to get to that, you go to podcasters.spotify.com. Really easy process. You just log in or create an account if you don't have a Spotify account, and then put the RSS feed of your podcast in. You'll be asked to verify that you are the owner of that podcast, which is just they send you an email basically, and you click yes, I own this, and then you'll have that in a dashboard, and you'll be able to access that at any time as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so next question then is, how can I increase my total plays and listeners? That's a question we get asked quite a lot, I know. The easiest way to do it basically is just sharing your podcast wherever you can. If you have social media, share it on there. If you don't set it up, it's easy enough to do. It doesn't have to be specific to your podcast. You can just share it on your own personal profiles. If you do want to create a separate one for your podcast, then that's great. You can communicate with your community easier as well. Drop the link to it in your actual podcast recordings yourself, so people know where they can find you to talk to you. Again, it's just easier for people to communicate and share your podcast if they know how to communicate and share with you directly. If you create a sense of community, then people are more likely to share it with each other. And then you're just going to build a much bigger audience for yourself. And it's a little time consuming to start with, but the rewards are worth it definitely if you're trying to build a bigger audience.
100%.
And again, finding people that are doing podcasts that are similar to you, that's a great way as well. You can just swap shout outs on each other's podcast or do interviews, anything like that. If they have their own pages or groups on Facebook or anything, then just ask if it's all right for you to drop a link to your podcast in there, and then you'll be talking to their audience as well, and you know they're going to be interested because you have a similar podcast. It's just a win-win for both of you that way. Anything to add on that one, Laura?
I think you pretty much covered everything there.
Cool.
I've been silenced.
Okay, so here's one for you then. What makes Podcast.co different from other hosts?
That's a good question, and one that I get asked a lot. I suppose I should probably go over some of the things that current customers tell us, and you can see this on reviews as well. So a lot of the common things that get mentioned to me, in particular, being on the support desk as feedback, is we do a lot in terms of making sure that people are situated comfortably into Podcast.co. We don't just kind of onboard you and then say bye and leave it to you to work things out. We're constant. We're like a constant presence. Like, we're always there to answer questions and help you out if you get stuck, give advice, that kind of thing. Also, we don't use bots on the support. So we have a couple of bots on there just telling you the latest updates and things like that. But if you ask a question, you will always get through to an actual person. So it's not just going to be a bot that's like taking its best guess at what you've asked and firing you an article and saying, okay, we're done here. It's always going to be either myself or another member of the team that you get through to. So you're never going to be left hanging on that. A lot of customers have told us that they really appreciate the fact that we actively take on feedback. So anything that is maybe not working as well as it could, or things that people see and they're like, oh, hey, this would work better if, I don't know, it had something a little bit extra to it. Let us know, by all means. We have a feedback forum for that very reason. And our team are constantly accepting feedback through that forum to see what we can add and what we can change and improve on. People really seem to appreciate that. So I guess in a really long-winded way, I've basically just said communication is where we stand out from other hosting platforms. And also we have some really cool features in the platform, with more coming as well, constantly. And also, an interesting one in terms of pricing is we seem to be one of few hosting platforms that don't charge in terms of how many episodes you upload. A lot of hosting platforms seem to put a limit on how many episodes you can upload per week, per month. We don't do that. We basically say the episodes are unlimited as long as you're not going absolutely crazy. The episodes are unlimited for your podcasts, and we basically work on a downloads basis instead. But the starter plan actually gives you 10,000 monthly downloads, which is, if you're reaching around that amount, you can actually start looking into sponsorships. So we've been pretty generous with that, so you don't have to worry about that.
And that leads nicely into my next question, which is, how can I receive a sponsor for my podcast?
What a segue. So yeah, we do actually have a sponsorships program, I guess you could call it, which is basically if your podcast starts reaching a healthy 10,000 downloads or thereabouts per month, yes, per month, then we can basically, if you reach out to us and tell us that, hey, I'm doing really well, here's my stats for the month and for like the last couple of months, do you think you'd be able to talk to me about sponsorships? If it's around 10,000 per month, we'll probably turn around and be like, yeah, absolutely, and try and find you a sponsor for your podcast that way. That is not to say that if you have a podcast that is reaching under 10,000, you can't start approaching companies yourself and trying to broker something yourself that way. The only thing to mention with that is that most of the companies that we talk to broker sponsorship deals for other podcasters, they are looking for around about 10,000 downloads per month as a base figure before they start being interested. So it might not happen, but it's also, we're not going to sit here and stop you if you want to I keep knocking my microphone. That's really unprofessional. We're also not going to stop you if you do want to go out and try and get something yourself. I'm going to stop waving my hands around so I stop knocking my microphone.
And yeah, just on the sponsorships program as well, unlike certain other big platforms that I won't name, you will maintain full say on whether or not you want this sponsor on your podcast. We work directly with you and the companies that we partner with for sponsorship. So if it's not a right fit for your podcast or your audience, then you'll get full say, and you can just say no, refuse it. On the same sense, if there is something that you want to be advertised on your podcast, you can just let us know, and then we can go about building that relationship and getting the sponsorship sorted for you. Okay, so next question is, I put my podcast together a year ago and did a couple of episodes of just me talking, and now it's stalled. How can I get back up strong and build up to interviews and brand building?
Oh, this sounds familiar. Me too. No, I did start a podcast last year, remember? And then it failed because I completely, no, you wouldn't remember. I had a similar thing happen. I started a podcast about a year ago, did a few episodes, and it just faded away.
I don't think you ever asked me to be on that. That's why I don't remember.
Well, it was a theatre part. That's not an excuse. You've done theatre before. Never mind. Let's not get into it. So in terms of getting it back up and going again, really the only advice I can give you there is probably just launch back into it. I wouldn't say you necessarily have to completely, take the old one down and completely restart it from scratch. You could probably do something with what you already have there. Even if it's in terms of taking the old episodes down and republishing them as if they're brand new, that's definitely something that you could do. I don't know if Daryl has anything else to add on to this.
No, I think that's a great thing to do. Is just to, if you've noticed that it's stalled, then your audience is going to notice it as well. So it's just best to get on top of that and fix it while you can. If you know what's wrong, then you know how to fix it. If you are looking for guests, there is a certain website you can go onto to find some guests. It's called matchmaker.fm. And I think Laura is going to do a quick run through of the website for you now.
Very quick, and I promise it won't be as long as the Podcast.co one. So yeah, basically this is another little side thing that we set up to help podcasters find appropriate guests for their podcasts and vice versa. So it's completely, is it free to sign up for? It is, Daryl? Yeah,
it's completely free to use. There is a plan, but you don't have to. It's free.
Yes. So, I mean, really, you could sign up for free, see if you like it, and then go for the paid if you really, really like it, which is what a lot of people have done, actually. So here on the homepage, you can see all the latest shows and guests that have signed up to the platform. But if you want to go searching for a specific guest for your podcast, for example, you can click on Find a Guest up the top here. And then we have a lot of lovely people in here. But I have a podcast about books, and I would rather them be in the United Kingdom just because it's easier for me to schedule calls and stuff. I only speak English, so we'll have to have them speak in English. And I don't want anybody that's unavailable because if they're unavailable, they won't talk to me. Click apply filters there, and then it's narrowed it down to some lovely people who are willing to talk about books in the United Kingdom. And our lovely James Deanie's back again. Oh,
talk about books.
He's going to love this when he sees it. So then I can click on them. I can check out a bit of their information, see where they're based, see all these bits over here. So I can see that he's okay with doing remote interviews here, and he's got a microphone and a webcam, which is great. He's also linked his LinkedIn here, so I can go and check him out on LinkedIn, find out a bit more about him. And if I wanted to contact him right away and say, oh my gosh, you're amazing, be on my podcast, I can click contact James. If I had a podcast set up, it would let me then send a message to him directly. Didn't realize I'd removed the podcast from that. I can contact him directly, send him a message saying, wow, you look like a great fit. come be on my podcast. And hopefully he'd message me back and say, yeah, that sounds like a plan. If I'm not quite ready to ask him to be on my podcast yet, but he's a good contender, I can click the favorite button right here, and that adds it to a favorites list. So that's just up in favorites at the top here, if I click that. So you can set up a couple of different lists here. So if you've got a couple of different projects going on, you can set up different lists for those. I only have this one at the moment. And then in here, you can see all the people that I've saved. There's Daryl, look.
Oh, you got me on there.
Yeah, you're one of my favorites, Daryl.
I think favorites are only available on the list. Multiple lists are only available on the paid plan. But free plan, you can just add as many people into one list.
There we go. So yeah, and then you can save them in here and come back to them later when you are ready to send them a message. And the same thing works for podcasts as well. So if you're a guest and you wanted to find an appropriate podcast to be on, again, I apologize, my internet is atrocious today. There we go. So say I wanted to be on a books podcast in the United Kingdom, speaking English, because I'm not multilingual as much as I want to be. I can apply those filters and really filter it down and find some lovely podcasts about books in the United Kingdom. And then I can find out a bit more about the show, check the podcast out, see if I like the format of it, that sort of thing. And then, yeah, you can contact the show and see if you can apply to be a guest on it. And it's that simple.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. That's the last time we're going to use Laura's screen to show anything, because clearly the hamster that's running her internet has fallen asleep.
I need to go wake him up.
Okay, we just got a few more questions. Again, if you do have any more, just drop them into the chat below and we'll get to them. So next one is, I'm going crazy trying to get a license so I can play music in my podcast. I'm not sure why you'd air quote podcast like that, but okay. I've visited dozens of sites and no luck. Can you help me? So how do you go about getting a license to play music in a podcast, Laura?
I am probably going to make you go even more crazy, and I'm so sorry, Natalia. So yeah, unfortunately, podcast music licensing is not a thing at the moment. I did have an interesting conversation with someone recently, as it looks like PRS have adjusted their limited online music license, and it says it includes podcasts, which looks great until you read further down the page and it says it only applies to podcasts that are only being played out to a UK audience. And Apple and Spotify and all those lovely platforms are globally available by default, and they're not able to be geo-restricted. So essentially that would work for if you had maybe a private podcast that was maybe you could embed it into a website that was geo-restricted to the UK, that kind of thing. But it wouldn't work for podcasts that want to be distributed on Apple and Spotify, etc. Obviously, as soon as that changes and we have some sort of headway in terms of podcast music licensing, we'll update. We'll probably have some social media posts going out about it saying, hooray! But for now, it's not a thing. So we just recommend steering clear of copyright music altogether. I get a lot of people that do come to me and say, well, we've been on Spotify for ages with our copyright music, so nothing's happened to us. But Spotify in particular actually are cracking down on copyright music. We've seen a lot of takedowns recently, so it probably will come about eventually. So it's more just prevent it before it can happen. So there's plenty of copyright-free music that you can use, a couple of different sources. We have our own, actually, that one of our lovely team members created. Thank you, Tom. So if you go to podcast.co/music, there's a whole album on there of podcast-safe music you can use. And also, I believe there's a second album in progress. I don't know when that's going to be released because it's been pushed back a bit because of all the pandemic stuff that's been going on. But that will be released at some point as well. And you'll have a whole new album on there to go and have a look at.
Yeah, so generally, if it's royalty-free, you're absolutely fine. Anything else, err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question is, what is the best length of time for most educational podcasts? So this is a question, again, we get asked quite a lot, is the ideal length for a podcast. In reality, there is no ideal length for a podcast.
I have something to say about this because I
Oh.
noticed it just before we started this live stream. I don't know if it's happening on everybody's phone or if it's just happening on mine. I logged into Spotify and noticed that they had a podcast under 15 minutes section, little timeline. So it may be worth limiting to 15 minutes to see if you can get into that section. But it was just a little section on my Spotify screen, and I thought that was interesting. So
looking to see if it's just you because you have a short attention span, or if
it might just me because I have a short attention span.
You won't pay attention.
But I did have a little timeline on my screen saying, I think it was podcasts at under 15 minutes or podcasts at 15 minutes, something like that, 15-minute episodes. So I just thought that was interesting and worth sharing on that question. But yeah, Daryl's right, about 20 minutes, probably 30 minutes max. I wouldn't go over that for an educational podcast because obviously people like me have short attention spans. And bite-sized information is very popular.
I don't have that category on my...
You don't have that? Oh, no. It's just me then because of my short attention span. But it exists. Spotify does do that, so there you go.
But they only market it towards people with short attention span.
But yeah.
But yeah, no, just the best thing you can do is just get started on your podcast, do the length of time that you feel is right for you. And then once you've got the audience built up, see what they're into, communicate with them, if they want it longer, if they want them shorter, cater to the people that you're trying to get to listen.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it can be anything from 20 minutes to 3 hours. It depends entirely on the audience. Okay, so next up is, can I just take the audio from my YouTube channel and use that, adding an intro and outro? You can, but you'd have to convert the file because it would be a video file and you can't upload a video file to Podcast.co. Test me on this, but I think it's just MP3 and M4A.
Yes, but if you upload an M4A, celebrating. If you upload an M4A, we will convert it to an MP3 on our end, so it is just better to upload an MP3.
Yeah, I mean, if you're converting it yourself on YouTube, then yeah, I feel like multiple conversions like that is going to decrease the audio quality, but then I'm not. I don't know. I'm just saying that it sounds right. Do you have any plans to upgrade the current way stats are displayed? The ability to pull up a specific date on the calendar and not just the top 5 would be very helpful. I feel like that's something we could probably get in the works. We'll add that onto the feedback form.
That last part of the question you can actually already do in terms of pulling up a specific date.
That was
yeah, so I day by day. So I think I actually closed my screen by accident. But essentially, I think I did show it earlier on. So once this is finished, you can actually skip back and find the part that I'm on about. But in your episodes tab, when you're looking at the episode analytics, if you click the date range in the top left of the graph at the top that shows your total and unique downloads, you can select a custom date range on the calendar. So I think when I showed the example, I clicked a separate start and end date. But if you just wanted to see an individual day, you could just click the same date twice as the start and end date, and it'll adjust and show you just that day's data. And same thing, if you wanted to see a week, you'd do a week, so you can customize it that way as well. So there you go.
Okay, cool. I don't have DJs. It's a talk show. How can all of them upload their own content? This can be done via a network plan. Laura's doing a face here.
Fine, right. I'm trying to...
I am right, aren't I?
You are right. I'm trying to reconnect my screen.
Network, and then set up a podcast for each of the talk shows, and then allocate DJs their own podcast within the network, and then they can only upload their shows onto there. Laura is putting up a screen here, so I will just bring it in, and here we go.
Yeah, there we go. So we said we weren't going to bring Podcast.co back again, but here we go. So yeah, what Daryl was talking about there is basically the pro and business accounts are both network accounts. So you can have multiple podcasts on there, but you can also have multiple users. So if I go into account settings here and then collaborators on the left, you can see I've got a few of our lovely team added to this account. But if I wanted to add someone else, say Daryl, for example, because he's not in here, I could pop his email address in here and then select a role for him. So account admin will have access to all the podcasts on the account. They just won't have access to billing because that's reserved for the account owner only. And limit to specific podcasts is for adding those users that you only want to be able to access their own content and nobody else's. So I can add them to the podcast, for example, and make them a podcast manager. That means they'd be able to do everything to do with that one podcast, but they won't be able to access anything else. Or I can add them as a content creator to give them really limited access, and that basically means they'll have access to the episodes tab, and I believe analytics as well. And that's it. They won't have access to all the other tabs, including the main settings of the podcast and things like that. So depends on how much access you want the person to have.
Yeah, so that'd be the best way to get all your DJs onto their own talk shows within Podcast.co. Yeah. Are you on a contract, and can you upgrade and downgrade at any time? No and yes.
Yeah. So we don't put you on a contract in terms of once you're in, you can't get out. You can. It's on a monthly/yearly basis, depending on how you set it up. So what most people tend to do is they set it up on monthly first, and then if they really like us, they'll bump it up to annual, so they don't have to pay every month. They can just pay once a year and then forget about it.
Save money.
And save money because you get 2 months free with the annual plan. To clarify, because I get some confusion on that sometimes, you pay 10 months worth, but you get 12 months worth of service. You don't get 2 months without paying. That's not how that works.
Yeah, so you pay it all up front, but it works as 10 monthly subscriptions.
Yeah, exactly. And you can upgrade and downgrade at any time. Upgrading is easier because you can do that by yourself from within your account. Super easy in a couple of clicks. Downgrading we can do for you, but you have to ask us to downgrade you. So that's just fire us a message, letting us know you want to downgrade, and we'll be able to help you sort that out.
Cool. And we've got just one more question, and it is, I'm thinking of transferring from Libsyn. I don't want to lose subscribers though. Will I be able to keep my RSS feed?
So you won't be able to keep your RSS feed, but you will not lose subscribers. So how that works is basically if you move over from, I've just noticed it ends with, I have the free trial and love the service. That's wonderful. So once you've imported your podcast into Podcast.co, which is basically just taking your RSS feed, put it in the import box, and boom, it's in. You then take your new Podcast.co RSS feed, which you can find in that share and publish section I showed you before, and take that over to Libsyn and apply a redirect over there. And basically what that does is it tells places like Apple and Spotify, etc., it basically puts a big neon sign on the RSS feed, your old one, and says, this podcast has moved, please look over here now. And the directories will see that and they'll change to use the Podcast.co feed instead. We usually recommend leaving that in place for a minimum of 7 days before you close your Libsyn account, just to allow everything enough time to transfer over to using your new RSS feed. But to your normal, regular listeners, it won't look like anything has changed. Your subscribers will still stay exactly where they are, and you'll still have all of your ratings, reviews, etc. It just swaps the feeds out in the background and nobody knows.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it for the questions then.
Great.
So yeah, I guess we'll round it off here. Thanks everyone for coming to join us. If you're watching this after the live stream, thanks for watching it. If you do have any more questions and you've missed your chance, you haven't really missed your chance, just drop us an email, hello@podcast.co, or you can just do it via the chat widget on the website, either in your account or just on the podcast.co site. And Laura, myself, or whoever's working the chat that day will get back to you as soon as possible. So yeah, thanks for all of that, Laura. I learned a lot. And I like it.
Good, I'm glad.
Yeah. So we will see you next month. So the next one will be on the 25th of February, which is the last Thursday in February. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, before you go anywhere, I have a quick question for you. Do you have a podcast? And if you do you want to book more interesting, high-profile guests on your show? Well, if you answered yes to either of these questions, I'd love to invite you to come and join our community over at matchmaker.fm. Matchmaker is a service that connects awesome podcasts just like yours with incredible and high-profile guests that make for really interesting conversations. It's really straightforward to get started and completely free to sign up. Just connect using your LinkedIn, Facebook or Google account, and then you can begin connecting with guests based on their area of expertise, location, and much more. If you haven't checked it out already, go to matchmaker.fm, get started. It's just like Tinder, but for podcasters.